Hey all, before we get to the main meal of this video, a huge thank you is in order. When I woke up this morning to enjoy a cup of tea and a brand new video from one of my all-time favourite YouTubers, Cosmic Skeptic, you can only imagine how shocked I was when he not only mentioned my channel, but gave me a massive shout out. Consequently, I now once again have a community on my channel, which in honesty, to me, means I have a channel again. You were right, Alex. Losing my entire channel crushed my enthusiasm for making videos, and the whole ordeal was demoralising and grueling. But alas, I can now say that it was a hard time rather than it is a hard time, and that's thanks to your kindness. And so sincerely, you have my utmost gratitude. Thank you. I also want to quickly state to future subscribers that Cosmic Skeptic's channel is very similar to mine. And so if you like my content, you'll probably like his, and so I strongly recommend that you check out his work. Just don't get distracted by his warped drawers. You'll know what I mean when you get there. Anyhow, now for the main meal. So I've been meaning to take on Thomas Aquinas' Unmoved Mover, or Prime Mover, for quite some time now. But when I woke up this morning and saw for the first time a Prager University video titled God vs Atheism, Which is More Rational?, I simply had to drop all other projects to jump on this nonsense immediately, while I'm still furious. This is the Unmoved Mover Debunked. In the interest of keeping this video relevant, I'm going to address Kreeft's specific rendition of the Unmoved Mover, rather than Aquinas', because while the two differ in the language and references that they use, they are nevertheless fundamentally the same. And so, here's Kreeft presenting the argument.
The argument starts with the not very startling observation that things move. But nothing moves for no reason. Something must cause that movement. And whatever caused that must be caused by something else, and so on. But this causal chain cannot go backwards forever. It must have a beginning. There must be an unmoved mover to begin all the motion in the universe, a first domino to start the whole chain moving, since mere matter never moves itself.
So, straight from the outset, I want to point out two absolutely devastating flaws. The first is that even if we accept every premise of Kreeft's presentation of this argument, all this would prove is that an unmoved mover existed, and that's it. Seriously, that's all it would prove. It would not prove that this unmoved mover still exists, that it's a being, that it's conscious, or that it impregnated a virgin in order to sacrifice itself to itself so it could forgive you for your ancestors' actions. Or in other words, it would not prove that Kreeft's very specific interpretation of Christianity is true. The second game-ending flaw with this argument is that premise 3, the assertion that something must have existed without a cause, is an obvious case of special pleading. A special pleading fallacy occurs when a proponent creates an exception to a rule without adequate justification, and that is precisely what premise 3 is doing. It is literally asserting that premise 2, the assertion that everything in motion is caused to be in motion by something else, applies to absolutely everything except for the cause of the universe, without adequately justifying why. In fact, by itself, the argument doesn't even attempt to substantiate this assertion, it just makes it. And this brings us perfectly to the crux of Kreeft's faulty reasoning. In his attempt to prove that an unmoved mover does indeed exist, he offers us two additional faulty arguments. The first is the assertion that
we now know that all matter, that is, the whole universe, came into existence some 13.7 billion years ago, and it's been expanding and cooling ever since.
Now you might be thinking, surely this assertion is true, isn't it? I mean, I've heard many well-respected scientists saying the same, haven't I? Well, the answer is that it depends. It depends on what definition of the word universe is being used. Allow me to explain. If we are using the scientific definition of the universe, that being all matter, space and time, then yes, it is accurate to say that the Big Bang was the beginning of the universe. But if we are using the colloquial definition of the universe, that being everything that exists, everything that has existed, and everything that will exist, then no, it is inaccurate to say that the Big Bang was the beginning of the universe. Hence, because Kreeft uses the scientific definition of the universe for the conclusion of this additional argument, but he uses the colloquial definition of the universe for the conclusion of his main argument, he therefore commits an equivocation fallacy, and hence his argument is invalid. And the second faulty argument that Kreeft presents is the assertion that
because Einstein's general theory of relativity says that all time is relative to matter, and since all matter began 13.7 billion years ago, so did all time. So there's no time before the Big Bang.
Now you might again be thinking, surely this one is correct, isn't it? But again, you'd be wrong. It's a false premise. To quote Sean Carroll, my all-time favourite theoretical physicist.
So a lot of cosmologists will say there was a beginning. And the problem with this is that the prediction that there's a beginning, or the understanding that there's a beginning, is based on general relativity, and we know general relativity is not right. The reason we know it's not right is because, for one thing, it is not compatible with quantum mechanics. So basically, we have a prediction that the universe began based on a theory we have no right to trust.
And hence, to quote Carroll again, the correct thing to say about the Big Bang is not that there was no time before it, but rather that our current understanding of the laws of physics give out at that moment in time. Or to put this in another way, just as Newton's law of universal gravitation functions perfectly when applied to our everyday lives, but fails when applied to celestial bodies, Einstein's general theory of relativity functions perfectly when applied to our everyday lives and celestial bodies, but it fails when applied to the Big Bang. Hence, when it comes to the question of what existed before the Big Bang, the real answer is we don't know. And to add "therefore God" to the end of this would be a classical argument from ignorance, which, indeed, is unfortunately exactly what many proponents of the Unmoved Mover do. Anyhow, to recap, Kreeft's rendition of Aquinas' Unmoved Mover is flawed because even if every premise of the argument is accepted, it would not prove that Kreeft's specific God exists, and premise 3 commits a special pleading fallacy. And the two additional arguments that Kreeft offers are flawed because the first commits an equivocation fallacy when used as a premise in Kreeft's main argument, and the second is simply false. It's a false premise. As always, thank you kindly for the view, and I'll leave you with yet another quote from the amazing Sean Carroll.
We use the phrase the Big Bang to refer to that earliest moment of the history of the universe where we don't understand what is going on. It's a placeholder for our lack of understanding.